How's it going, everybody? And welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask me anything that you like about politics, and I will do my best to give you a great answer, regardless of if your question is complicated or simple. I don't believe in making fun of people for trying to learn new things. I am just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. So if you got any questions about politics, just put them in the chat and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know that it can be like trying to learn a new language, and I also know that there's a lot of weird misinformation abounding these days with a lot of propaganda and, you know, AI slop that is having a deleterious effect on the American public being able to see what our government is actually up to and see what the lives of our fellow citizens are like. And so, where can you go to ask questions about what's actually going on in the country? Well, you can ask all those questions here. What's up, JP? Good to see you again. So, yeah, any questions that you have about politics, just let me know in the chats, and I'll do my best to give you a great answer. Everybody is welcome here, Democrat, Republican, everything on the outside and in between. This is not a show where people fight each other. This is not a if you don't agree with me, you can go to hell show. This is not a show for, what do you call it? For people to try to own each other. Andrew says Groypers question mark. I mean, I'll if they're here in good faith, I will accept a Groyper, you know. If a Groyper tells me why are Jews so evil, but they're asking like sincerely, then I'll tell them like we're not, we're just regular people like you and me. And then, we'll go from there. It's All Theater says this is not you looked at the health insurance kickbacks to politicians from insurance companies. This is not. I looked at the health insurance kickbacks to politicians from insurance companies. It's All Theater. Do you have a question about politics? So, welcome everybody to Ask Me Anything About Politics. I'm here to answer all of your questions about politics, regardless of how simple or complicated the question might be. So long as you are asking in good faith, then I will answer in good faith. So, throw your comments in the chat, throw your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to give you an objective, accurate, and sincere answer. So yeah, I know that politics is a real minefield these days with all of there. I'm sure that there are people out there. Maybe you're one of them who you feel like you can't even ask certain questions because you're worried about how people are going to judge you. Well, there's no judgments here. There's no roasting. There's no debating. It is just going to be good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. Poppy Harlow, good to see you again. Says you kept up with the Jersey City mayoral election as well. And I have not. I'm no longer on the East Coast, so I'm not intimately knowledgeable of all the local politicians in that area. Unfortunately, C. Pross too says, why did Democrats support funding ICE in Trump's budget bill? I don't believe that they did. C. Pross. I mean, yeah, we're talking about the CR right now. Like the Democrats are holding out on supporting the budget bill so that they can get subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. C. Pross. Is that what you're referring to? Because I haven't heard of any Democrats supporting funding ICE except for potentially John Fetterman. John Bradley says, what's your speculation on how the shutdown will end? So it appears as though the Democrats are in negotiations to have a vote on the Affordable Care Act subsidies going forward. I personally hope that they don't settle for that, but it's a complicated moving target trying to reopen the government, and so I don't believe that it is disqualifying if they settle for that. So I just don't think that they should. Xavier says, man, is it me or ever since 2020 USA lost so much aura? Back in the 2020s, USA was so respected. Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of things that we could point to that are, intimately related to that sense that you have, Xavier. I would point very specifically to social media, billionaire-funded propaganda, a increasingly extremist right-wing Republican Party. Jack, good to see you again. Says, do you know which Dems are for the government staying shut down as a form of leverage against the rights? I don't know. I know that there are certain people like John Fetterman who are eager to sign on to the budget bill, the continuing resolution to reopen the government. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure who's squishy on this issue. But yeah, I think for Dems, no, I don't believe that Democrats would describe it as a form of leverage against the right. I believe that they would describe it as trying to lower healthcare costs for American citizens, because that's what they're holding out for. They are trying to call attention to the fact that the Republican Party is about to make everybody's health insurance costs skyrocket, and so they are using the shutdown as leverage to try to make Americans' lives better. Xavier says, but now the USA is like one of the most trash on countries now. I mean, can you blame other countries for doing that? CPRA says they are opposing the SNAP cuts, which is great, but they aren't pushing back on ICE funding. That's interesting, CPRA. So I haven't heard that reporting. If I had to guess why they were doing that, I'm guessing that maybe in polling, the majority of Americans believe that we need ICE, but they just don't like the way that ICE is conducting their business. So, I mean, do I personally think that that's the right move politically? No, but I guess I can understand where they get from point A to point B. Okay, fucking HDX Legend says, am I wrong for saying Donald Trump and the guy from Austria rose to power the same way? No, there are a lot of similarities. They both were in power and then out of power. They both had legal issues while they were out of power. They're doing very similar things as far as being isolationist and, setting up a separate sort of like military unit that is beholden only to the president. For the fellow from Austria, it was, the Gestapo, and for Trump, it's ICE. Concentration camps, check. Attacking the media, check. Attacking institutions of higher education, check. Consolidating power, check. Firing everybody that's not a loyalist, check. It's on point, man. Alrighty. John Bradley says Obama was probably the most universally respected president of the century. Yeah, I probably agree with that. C process. I'm a communist, but I'm going to vote because I can't imagine Sears running my state. Which state do you live in? C pros. Jack says I saw a video of a woman saying it's leverage, and the only one the left has right now is why I say. Yeah, there are many different ways to describe what is happening that I think make it seem like certain parties are kind of like gamifying the systems of the government for political gain, as opposed to, doing tough negotiations to make Americans' lives better. I don't think that individuals using words like leverage are like bad people, Jack. I'm not saying that you were wrong to do it. I'm just saying I am trying to be careful not to fall into traps that the right is setting, as far as like making it seem like the Democrats are being callous with people's lives because they want to, keep the government shut down to make the Republicans look bad, or something like that. Yeah, I'm just trying to be as accurate as I possibly can. Xavier says, unpopular opinion, I don't support ICE, and if they plan to get better, they need to train their officers. I mean, I think we can get rid of ICE entirely. They're a rogue agency, they're unnecessary, they're redundant, and everybody that is currently in ICE is guilty of barbaric atrocities, detaining American citizens, deporting people who don't deserve to be deported, unnecessary violence and uses of force. There's a report of a dude in LA who got shot in the back by ICE officers. It's like fucking Obama tried to rein these guys in and they told him to go kick rocks. So it's like, maybe we shouldn't be funding you. Maybe you shouldn't be like the eighth best, most well-funded, what's the word I'm looking for? Security force in the world. I think they have more funding than the Italian army. Mike Turner says, I'm very proud of President Trump and ICE doing what I voted for. Cool. That's not a question, so you're out of here. Deuces Wild says, do you know how many Americans will die a year via the healthcare cuts in the big, beautiful bill? I don't, but I'm sure that some people have crunched the numbers. I'm sure it's got to be, in the hundreds of thousands, if not the millions. Smile says, I heard Bill Gates said climate change is a hoax. Bill Gates never said that. Jack says, do you think the original concept of ICE, if used right, could have been a good thing? Sure, Yeah, I believe ICE, if I'm remembering correctly, was kind of created as a response to 9/11, where we wanted border patrol that was a little bit more focused on national security, and that does not appear to be what ICE has ever done in their, in their existence. Nimi says, "Are you MAGA?" No, I am not. Otter says, "What do you think of Trump backing out of the Paris Agreement?" It was really stupid, like climate change is not just going to make our planet less livable, but is also going to make our country less safe. Like even military generals who are not like liberal squishes have been saying this for a long time, that preparing for climate change, doing something about climate change, moving to renewable, green energy over fossil fuels is a national security priority. And the Republican Party, who is supposed to really give a shit about national security, has just been spitting in the face of all of that data and then the recommendations of their own fucking military. Zach Higby says the whales don't like windmills. No, they love windmills. Richard says so true. El Toro Perro Loco, it's good to see you again. Says, would deporting 10 million people free up enough housing, healthcare, and social safety programs? I don't believe so. I think that the money that we will lose in deporting all of those people is going to hurt Americans more than availability of services that those immigrants may or may not have been using up. Gare says, "Okay, Mr. X, can dogs vote? Yes or no?" They can't, but I do want to make the Air Bud jokes, as there's no rule in the books that say that a dog can't vote. Andrew says, "Any chance of lawsuits against ICE when it's all said and done? Would they even go anywhere?" Oh, 100%, Andrew. I believe that there are currently lawsuits against ICE. There's a dude who was just detained for no fucking reason. They just interviewed him on Pod Save America, and he is currently suing the federal government over what ICE did. In Chicago, they are looking into allegations that ICE has been switching out their license plates on all of their cars to try to stay anonymous, and that's illegal. So yeah, there is currently um, legal action being taken against ICE and the Trump administration. They are fighting an uphill battle because, number one, the Supreme Court is in the hands of the Republican Party. The judiciary is, the FBI, the DOJ is in the hands of the Republican Party. But, lawsuits take a really long time. So we should be 100% be doing that stuff right now for if Democrats, win the midterms in 2026 or take back the White House in 2028, then we will have, done a little bit of that work already. Stephen Cummings says, "Do you consider yourself a communist?" I don't consider myself a communist. I also don't consider myself a socialist. I also don't consider myself a capitalist. I believe in a mixed system, which we already have. We just have a little bit too much capitalism in our current mixed system. Elaine says, "They don't care about things until the threat outweighs the allure of money. Example, China, climate change, Russian oil." Hey, Elaine, it's you. Do I know you, Elaine? Or are you somebody I haven't? Because I don't recognize your name, Elaine. But yeah, you're 100% right about that. Okay, Gnosis says, "Don't you think Trump will pardon everyone?" So it is true that Trump has the power to pardon people within his administration who are facing legal consequences based on the things that they are currently doing in his administration. The exceptions to that would be if Trump is no longer president, and also if they are state charges that he would not be able to undo. Let's see here. El Toro Pero Locos. And also, Gnosis, I just want to say this, like, we should not be playing a game of what can we do that Trump won't undo. I think that we have been letting the Republican Party off the hook for a really long time, assuming they're going to filibuster stuff, assuming they're going to block stuff, assuming that the Supreme Court's going to overturn stuff. Like, I say make them do the thing that we think they're going to do, and then maybe this will connect with the American people eventually. I don't have a lot of faith in that, but I think it's better to get caught trying to do things and then have the Republicans do whatever fucking shenanigans or chicanery to undo it. And then we can at least go, look, we tried to make partisan gerrymandering illegal, but the Republicans filibustered it. We tried to raise the minimum wage, but the Republicans filibustered it, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, Massless Messiah. Not going to read that comment. Massless Messiah, weren't you here saying this controlled opposition stuff yesterday? Because it was nonsense yesterday, and it's nonsense still today. Osher, good to see you again. Oh, Inverted Mystic. Oh, gotcha. I recognize you now. Turner Boy Matt says, do you support Graham Plattner? I like Graham Plattner. I'm not a main voter, so it also doesn't really matter what I think about Graham Plattner. As a Jewish person, I buy his explanation for his quote unquote Nazi-ish tattoo, that he was a drunk person in the military who was dealing with a lot of PTSD and did not know what he was getting, and potentially when he found out it was what it was, he thought it was ironically funny to have it, to maybe didn't want to spend the money to cover it up or get it removed, and then when he either learned that it was real or it became an issue, he got it covered up. If you are a person of color who does not buy his excuses for the shit that he put on Reddit, if you are a woman who does not buy his excuses for the shit that he put on Reddit, then I guess that's up to you. I'm not really able to say how valid those excuses are, as I'm not a woman or a person of color. But as a Jewish person, I buy it. Mask Messiah says, Kirk's shirt jumps out. Yeah, I'm done with you, man. See you later. El Toro Burro Loco says, what's the name of that restaurant you like with all the goofy shit on the walls and the mozzarella? You mean Shenanigans? Sue Fisher Johnson says, so how does ICE get away with the violent tactics when even police don't use such violence? So the reason why ICE is getting away with it, Sue, is because all of the places where they would be held accountable are currently under the control of the MAGA Republican Party. So Congress, the judiciary, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the presidency, like all are under Republican control, and they have no problem with what ICE is doing. They have no problem with ICE taking an American citizen and shoving them to the ground. They have no problem with ICE shooting a pastor in the face with a pepper ball. They have no problem with ICE shooting an American citizen in the back. And if you think that's a problem, if you think that Congress should be holding ICE accountable and making sure that they don't use excessive force and illegally detain American citizens, then you should vote against every Republican that you can, because they're fine with this. They are okay with this. They're either asleep at the wheel or they are endorsing it, and either one of those, I think, is a massive indictment. All right, Average Joe, good to see you again. Why do you think progressives are expected to vote blue no matter who, but it's acceptable for centrists and moderates to dance around endorsing Mamdani like a Russian ballet? It's interesting that you, Average Joe, I love you. I think you are making a common mistake in that question of equating voters and elected officials, where for the Republican Party, there's no blame for any of the shitty things that they do or their voters do. But for the Democratic Party, we are judged based on what our politicians do, both left and center. We are blamed on what activist organizations do. We are blamed for what protesters do, whether or not they were left-wing people or right-wing paid agitators. We are blamed for random people on the internet, the things that they say. So yes, voters should 100% be voting blue no matter who, regardless of if they are a centrist, a moderate, or a progressive. But as far as like the elected leaders dancing around endorsing Mamdani like a Russian ballet, we've talked about this before. I can understand if there's a good faith reticence, like you are worried that Fox News is going to say that the Democratic Party is full communist, and you're worried that that's going to hurt down ballot races in red or purple districts. Like, I understand that. If you are somebody who has worse reasons for not wanting to endorse Mamdani, like you are worried about how the progressive movement threatens your own hold on power, or you are, I don't know, like a racist person or, Islamophobic or whatever, like then you can just fuck off and go to hell, But yeah, I think there are probably some good faith excuses for slow rolling your endorsements. Avery says, we're about to get the mom date of heaven. Do you agree? I sure hope you're right, man. Abdul says, gangs and criminals still hanging out in their neighborhood, and you don't see any ICE or National Guard there. Yeah, ICE is weirdly focusing on, areas that are not high crime areas. What's up, Lauren? Good to see you again. Luke says, are you worried about the state of our union? I am, Luke, but if people like you and me do the work, then we can get out of this. Gnosis says, they gonna say the pastor is leftist and deserves it, and then Fox air it, MAGA's gonna run with it. Yeah, they're going to say that, Gnosis, but, we are, at the same time as we're in a battle for control of our democracy, we are also in an information battle, and so it is incumbent upon all of us to be talking about these things and making sure that whatever narrative gets pushed on Fox News does not become the narrative. Alrighty, Random Bot says I'm CE is focusing on blue voting. ICE is focusing on blue voting neighborhoods. That is accurate. Andrew says, can Trump pardon ICE agents without revealing their names? Ooh, that's a really good question, Andrew. I'm 100% not sure about that. Laura, you never have to apologize for anything. You are a great regular. Sue Fisher says, ICE reminds me of what we see in third world countries when they are having civil unrest. Yeah, I mean, and the reason why Trump is doing so many outlandish things like having a Great Gatsby party and while at the same time threatening to cut SNAP benefits for people is because he wants us to get violence in response so that he can justify using ICE more violently and using the military and the Marines and shit like that. When he had that interview on 60 Minutes, he said that he didn't think ICE was going far enough. You know, he wants us to be more violent so that they can be more violent, basically. All right. Adrian Brakey says, I lead a youth organization in North Carolina. People under 35 are really energized by Mamdani. Older Dems need to realize this is the future. So, Adrian, I completely agree with what you were saying, but there's an asterisk on it. Are you still here, Adrian? I want to make sure you're going to hear what I have to say. Because I do struggle with both my agreement with the progressive wing of the party and my belief in my heart that progressive policies are what win Democrats elections, but there is some very strong polling against the Democratic Party embracing those kinds of principles. Now, there is a weird, if you actually dig into the data, like there's some weird shit that's going on there. Like the reason why people like Mamdani are popular is because they're focusing on economic issues. And that is what people view as being what they want the Democratic Party to be doing. But they also say things like, we don't like that the Democrats are going to give undocumented immigrants free health care, and we don't like that they're going to force everybody to buy an electric car, and we don't like that they're going to force everybody to stop eating meat, and that they want, you know, transgender for everybody and stuff like that, which is like things that they're going to lower the voting age to 16, stuff like that. So there's a disconnect between what progressivism means and what people like and what the Democratic Party is doing and, you know, what progressives is and, you know, and shit like that. So if you ask somebody, you know, like, do you think the Democratic Party has gone too far to the left? They'll say yes. Most Americans will say yes, if you statistically. But if you then ask them like what that means, what you will find are a bunch of things that both the Democratic Party in general and specifically the progressive wing are not doing. But if they ask you to point to Democrats that they like, they will talk about people like AOC and Bernie Sanders and Mamdani, who are the people pushing the party to the left. So it's like this weird, we don't know what words mean kind of a thing that's happening, you know? So yeah, I do, again, I agree with you, but it is difficult to use the fact that the Democratic Party is hedging on this as evidence that they suck, because there is data out there to suggest that being pushed to the left or being seen as too far to the left is politically damaging for the Democratic Party. All right. Jack Adama says, tell us who is most responsible for the government shutdown, the Republican Party and Donald Trump, who don't give a shit if Americans suffer. Lauren says, on the political spectrum, our left is actually more right than most of the world. Yeah, people generally say that, Lauren. I'm, what do you call it? I'm generally in agreement there, but I'm going to say I have a healthy amount of skepticism if that's actually true, especially considering how popular right-wing authoritarianism has become around the globe. Right, Luke says Democrats in the USA are in the middle compared to the rest of the developed nations. Again, I know that this is what people say, and if you're talking about what things look like in Germany or Norway or Sweden, you know, like generally speaking, I would agree with you. But there has been, for the past like 15 or so years, a weird resurgence in right-wing authoritarianism. So I don't know if that's true anymore. You know, like I would generally say that countries like Italy have a stronger, you know, left-wing government. But, you know, right now they're being governed by like Mussolini's granddaughter or some shit. Macron in France is supposed to be like this great, you know, they strike and revolt at the drop of a hat, but Macron is a centrist, and if his party loses the next election, it will probably be to Marine Le Pen, who is a fucking Putin-ish, fascist, audacious kind of a person, Sanford says actual lefties are just sacking for basics, healthcare for starters. I'm not sure what that means. Spain, I think, I believe Spain is still doing great. I believe Spain is still doing fighting authoritarianism pretty well. I remember reading articles about what the government in Spain was doing, and then telling my wife, "Let's go on vacation there because I want to support them with my tourism dollars." But then also they're upset about all the tourists being in Barcelona, so I guess I'm not going to do that. Adrian Brakey Lee says economic populism is the way forward, not necessarily socialism, but thank you for your thoughts. Absolutely, Adrian. Again, we agree with each other. I just believe that we tend to rake the Democratic Party over the coals for doing things that are explained away by how difficult the position that they are in is. Where electoral politics is weighted against them, the information environment is weighted against them, campaign finance is weighted against them, the mainstream media is technically weighted against them if you look at the data. And, they're trying to hold together a rainbow coalition of people from AOC to Joe Manchin. And so sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes they get attacked for good faith mistakes. Sometimes they are shitty people, like, Senator Menendez, who was accepting gold bars from Egypt. I like to clarify the complexity of these issues. Let's see here. Average Joe says, I guess I would ask, do we honestly compare Ezra Klein pushing support for pro-abortion Dems in red states while Schumer refuses to endorse the non-sex pest Dem candidates in a blue state? Average Joe, so I hear you 100%. People are far on the left are constantly being asked to make allowances for the center of the party for political expediency, all the while the people who are leading the party are giving us a bad name and appearing mealy-mouthed and word salady and not really meeting the moment that we are in. So yeah, I get that. And as a progressive, I find that stuff really annoying as well. But I actually kind of agree with Ezra Klein's piece. Ezra Klein just recently wrote an article about, like, should the Democratic Party be more progressive or more centrist? And he said the answer is both. Like, the Democratic Party is supposed to be everything. It's supposed to be a rainbow coalition of every different kind of American, not only every type of race and religion and sexual identity, but also the entirety of the political spectrum. Like, we can have our Joe Manchins and Kristen Sinemas, and we can also have our Bernie Sanderses and AOCs. And while I am furious at Manchin and Sinema for the way that they, tried to hobble the Biden administration's ability to get certain things done, I miss having their votes in the Senate. Like, we wouldn't be in the place that we are in right now if we had 2 more votes in the Senate. I think then at that point it would be 50-50, right? Am I wrong about that? Isn't it like 48 to 53 or something? I can't remember. Anyways. Alrighty. Captain Cosplay says, should healthcare be free? 100%, but let's be specific about what we're talking about, Captain Cosplay. Obviously, healthcare is never going to be free. You are either paying for it through insurance or you are paying for it through taxes. But if we have universal healthcare, Captain Cosplay, we are actually spending a lot less on healthcare, and we're not having to deal with a middleman. We are not, spending extra money so that some fucking CEO of a health insurance company can have a 5th yacht. And it's just better. Like, there's less bureaucracy to deal with. There is less paperwork. The number of times that I have had to delay care because I am waiting for my pre-authorization form 865B when the pharmacy only got my pre-authorization form 5X86A. And I'm talking to the pharmacy, who's talking to the doctor, and then I have to talk to the insurance company to call the doctor because they haven't called the pharmacy yet. It's like a fucking nightmare, And to everybody who is an advocate of universal healthcare that is watching, and I know that, if you agree with me politically, you probably agree as well that we need it. There are a couple of things that I think we should keep in mind. Number one is that the policy of universal healthcare is still more unpopular in America than not. There was a piece that just came out by a journalist called Deciding to Win, where he dives into a lot of this polling, and the majority of Americans do not support universal healthcare. I think that is a messaging war that we can win, and it is possible that that polling is off. But some data suggests that it is an unpopular policy. So not a fucking layup, you know. And number two is that even if we had universal support for universal healthcare, switching over is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, not only because it's going to take a lot of transitioning people from one role to another and speaking to every doctor's office in America about, you know, which form, now that you're not dealing with United Healthcare, you're going to have to do this instead. But also, you know, billionaires are going to spend a lot of money to try to torpedo the process. The Republican Party is going to do a lot to drag their feet or torpedo the process. So yeah, it's going to be difficult, but we should 100% do it. Sometimes you should do things because they're hard, you know, and not give up on things because they're hard. Jelly L Troll says government ran healthcare is not the answer. I mean, it would be better than what we have now. Among Llama says, how are you doing, Jared? I'm doing pretty good. Parse says both parties have completely failed the country. That is inaccurate, Parsed. The Democratic Party has done a lot more for the American people than the Republican Party has, and the Republican Party has done a lot more damage to the American people than the Democratic Party has, and it's not even a close game. So to paint both parties with the same brush like that is irresponsible and inaccurate. Shannon Taylor says, this guy has obviously zero experience with universal health care. Well, I mean, I've lived in America my entire life, so I guess the answer to that question is yes, but I know a lot about it and how it works in other countries. Dane Bernstein says, when has anything ever improved when the government took over? I'll give you a couple of examples. Dane, number one, the Affordable Care Act made it so that insurance companies couldn't discriminate against you for having pre-existing conditions. And it lowered the rate at which healthcare costs were increasing in America. So there are people who were not able to afford healthcare and people who were not able to get any healthcare because they have pre-existing conditions who are now able to get healthcare. So the Affordable Care Act saved lives. There you go. Let's see here. Among Llama says, the truth is the Democratic Party at winning elections, but govern. I think what you're saying, Among Llama, is that the Democratic Party is bad at winning elections, but they govern much better. And I would actually push back against that also, Among Llama, because we are not taking into account all of these structural inequities against the Democratic Party in winning elections. The Electoral College, gerrymandering, and the Senate map all favor the Republican Party. The Republican Party is more of a monolith, which means that it's a lot easier to coalesce around certain leaders or messages, whereas the Democratic Party is a rainbow coalition made up of a bunch of little groups, and it's a lot harder to organize that. There's a lot more money available to the Republican Party than there is the Democratic Party because the Republican Party cuts taxes for the billionaire class, and so the billionaire class opens their checkbooks for their super PACs and all their dark money channels. The media environment is weighted against the Democratic Party, where every quote-unquote centrist media organization, in order to appear nonpartisan and centrist, will often overhype negative stories about the Democratic Party and underhype them against the Republican Party because they want to appear impartial. And then, of course, you have the entire right-wing propaganda media sphere, which is completely captured, you know, social media, in addition to having the most popular news channel, Fox News, on the planet. So you take all of that stuff into consideration, and I haven't even mentioned a couple of stuff. I always forget one or two when I go through that list. It's kind of amazing that the Democrats have won as much as they have, and it is only because they're such a better party than the Republican Party that they have been able to stay competitive despite all of those disadvantages. Alrighty, Misty Lane says, you are a deeply intellectual person. If you ran the country, it would be fixed within 10 years max. I really, that's a very sweet thing to say, Misty, but no single person can fix this country. We need Congress to also be filled with good people. We need state governments to also be filled with good people. And we need good people doing the work of countering the billionaire propaganda machine. Because without those, the person who is in the White House has, you know, they have a lot of power, but not enough to fix everything. Right. Okay, John Abbott, good to see you again. Elaney, I will get to those questions in just a second, but things are popping off on TikTok, so be patient with me. Twitch and YouTube. Gnosis says the Democrats now have a playbook to take bold actions. Trump has showed how it is possible with his executive orders. I'm not sure how much I agree with that, Gnosis. You know, the executive orders have limited efficacy, and where Trump's have more efficacy is because he is in control of the judiciary. You know, like he can decide which judges get certain cases. That was a little hyperbolic. Let me back up. The Supreme Court is in his pocket, so he can sign executive orders getting rid of birthright citizenships, which is, you know, blatantly unconstitutional. And it's an open question whether or not his Supreme Court is going to strike that down or not. Whereas a Democratic president's executive orders that are based in the law, like Biden canceling student loan debt, that gets struck down by the MAGA Supreme Court that we currently have. Alrighty. Fruda says, what party would take over? I don't know what that means. Nova says, do most people think Trump is responsible for the shutdown or the Democrats? Most people think that it's Republicans. Coco says, the billionaires should stay out of policies. Completely agree. All right. Let's see here. All right. Freuda says, what would the Republican Party look like after this current administration? I think probably there's just going to be a lot of infighting, trying to inherit the throne. You know, Ebony says, we have no checks and balances to benefit our country. We used to, but Trump is actively getting rid of them. And it's not that we have zero. We just have less right now. You know, we still can turn this shit around. David Crocker says, everyone I asked about shutdown said Dems. Well, I got to tell you, Davey, it is really taking all of my strength not to be a dick about that comment. So instead, I'm going to say this. What you just said is called anecdotal evidence, and it is not definitive by a long shot. So everybody that lives in my house says that Trump and Republicans is a piece of shit. So I guess everybody thinks that Trump is a piece of shit, right? You can see where saying everyone I asked said Democrats might not be the most productive or accurate sample set for a poll. Correct, Davey? All right, everybody. I deserve a fucking award. I deserve a fucking award for not being a dick to that guy. Because it would have, I had it, man. I had it locked in here, man. It was ready to go. The fucking, the trigger was, you know, itchy. What do you call it? All right. Andrew says, so what happens with all these court orders that Trump defies? I don't know, Andrew, and I'm really scared to find out. All right, let's get back in. Let's get into some of these Twitch and YouTube comments. Average Joe says, I'm sure you answered this before, but I don't remember. Doesn't it feel like this hypocrisy is the primary factor of Dem unpopularity? My issue isn't with Ezra Klein. I agree with him. So I don't view it as hypocrisy, Average Joe. I view it as leadership trying to do a bunch of different things and trying to make a bunch of different people happy. I think that because the information environment is so weighted against the Democratic Party, that normal concessions or compromises get blown into hypocrisy and get turned into hypocrisy, or I don't think that it exists. But, you know, if you have a specific example that you would like to discuss, let me know. Elaine says, what's wrong with having a fifth yacht? Are you just jealous because you haven't gotten your first yacht? Yeah, you nailed me, Elaine. You really fucking got me. John Abbott says, I work in consumer insights. My company doesn't do political polling, but it's part of my industry. Professionally, I just trust much of the polling on things like universal health care. Any policy far left enough for Dem politicians to think supporting it will scare off moderates is going to have skewed questions in any polling. That's really interesting, John Abbott. Yeah, I don't understand how America could be against universal health care. But yeah, if you look at that report at deciding to win, if you look at that report, there are a lot of policies that are in the neighborhood of people getting things for free, like universal health care, universal basic income, free public college, canceling student debts, that are generally more unpopular in America than they are popular. And so I wonder if this is just like America disease, thinking that everybody has to earn everything that they get. And unless, of course, you're a billionaire, in which case you can inherit your wealth and you can get into Harvard because your parents went there, et cetera. You can get a really high-paying job because your dad owns the company, and nobody has a problem with that. But a poor person getting something that they didn't work for, or an apartment that they didn't purchase themselves, or getting their student loans canceled just makes Americans so fucking mad. So, yeah, I completely am with you, and I don't understand why these policies would be polling that poorly, but I also see that vein of the American zeitgeist where we just hate it when we had to pay for something that somebody else gets for free, you know? And I don't personally believe in that, but I don't. Yeah, I would love to not live in that America anymore. I would love it if we could all be cool with that shit. Like if they come up with a new cancer drug tomorrow that is, are you going to insist that everybody still get chemo because you had to go through chemo? Doesn't make any sense to me. All right. Valpal says, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah, exactly. Let's see here. Eleni says, maybe if we stop spending money on ICE in Argentina, we could have public housing options. Yeah, that would be really nice, Eleni. Misty Lane says, public housing is pretty based and it's not exactly free housing. It would help so many people and give us more money to tax. Accurate, Misty. You're nailing it 100%. All right, back into the TikTok comments. Carmine, maybe it's a little bit of I'm never going to need that. Why should I pay for it? Yeah, maybe, but I just think that's maybe it was the messaging during the Reagan administration of welfare queens that just created this. There are parasites in this country, and the parasites are the poor instead of the rich. And so we need to fight against the freeloading poor as opposed to the freeloading rich. That's what's so cool about that movie Parasite, is that the entire movie is framed to suggest that this one really poor family is the parasite, but then when you get to the end of the movie, you realize that it's the rich people that are the parasites, Nosa says, Bob Marley says you can fool the people sometimes, but not all the time. I sure hope he's right. Troy Taguda says, Trump getting drug prices cheaper. Why didn't Democrats do that? So Biden actually did do that, Troy, and Trump is literally not doing that, Troy. So I would ask you to please get your information from other sources because that is inaccurate what you just said. Right. Lollipops and Rainbows says, weird. Everyone must suffer. Yeah, but we can make it so that less people suffer. Let's see here. Mick says, you're lying. No, I'm not. Lauren says, well, now I don't have to watch that movie. No, you should 100% watch that movie, Lauren. If only for your own enjoyment. It is an amazing movie. Bong Joon-ho is the director's name, I believe. And I think I've seen almost all of his stuff, and that movie is my favorite of his. Troy Chaguda says, no, it's not. Well, you're not asking questions, Troy. Ask a question or I will boot you. Jules says, they're all on the same team. The game is keeping us divided and watching. It's working. No, Jules, that is inaccurate. There are wildly different outcomes for Americans depending on who is in charge, both at the state and federal level. There are people alive today because of the Affordable Care Act. There are women who are dead today because of abortion bans. And that is, when that happens is depending on who is in charge. So yeah, if you're wondering who's trying to keep us divided, look at the billionaires who are trying to get us to fight amongst themselves so that we don't threaten their money and power, and look at the Republican Party that are hyping up all of these identity culture war issues instead of actually talking about substantive cost of living issues, All right. Angel MBR says it's not recognizing what blood, sweat, and tears that has gone into their wealth. Angel, I'm not sure exactly what you're saying, because the blood, sweat, and tears that creates wealth is the blood, sweat, and tears of the working class. No rich person gets rich by themselves. They get rich because working class people are making their cars or discovering the cures for their diseases, or even, let's say that you're the rare billionaire who invented a new pill that cures every disease and you deserve to have $1 billion. How are you going to get that pill made? How are you going to get that pill distributed? How are you going to get that pill into the hands of people at the pharmacy? It is all workers. So yeah, I don't believe that any human being has ever earned $1 billion, Right. Sudboy says, what do you think about Donnie? I like him a lot. Matthew says, when will the U.S. citizens finally get tired of being exploited? That is an excellent question, Matthew. Propaganda and misinformation is a hell of a drug. So hopefully people like you and me can shake people out of their stupors and illuminate them as to who is ruining their fucking lives. Triton says, I'll never understand bootlicking the rich. Yeah, same. I get it. And I have a personal conspiracy theory that I believe that shows that lionize the rich, like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, or Cribs, or Entourage, where it's all about like how cool conspicuous consumption is, buying flashy cars and massive houses and stuff like that. I believe that is a psyop by the billionaire class. But, I don't have any evidence that that's true. I just believe it. All right, Laura Gibbons says, Trump has disobeyed court orders before. What is the legal consequence? Laura, that's a moving target. We're not sure. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. We don't know. I'm buoyed somewhat by the fact that Trump hasn't openly defied the courts yet. Like, he's done it in very subtle ways. He has said he's done something and then not done it or only done half of it. If he really was in a powerful position, he would say what I think it was Andrew Jackson said, which was the Supreme Court has made their decision, now let them enforce it. Basically saying, like, I have the army and you don't. So what the fuck are you going to do? Trump hasn't done that, which says to me that he is worried about what America will do, or Congress, or the Supreme Court. I don't know. I don't know. It's a scary time, to be living, because we don't know what's going to happen. All right, Ecuadorian baseball pitcher. Good to see you again. Eleni says, why didn't bailing out the banks in 2008 why didn't bailing out the banks in the 2008 housing crisis not work? Why didn't it not work? Eleni, did you mean to say to do the double negative? Because I'm not sure what it is that you're asking. All right. Misty Lane says, you think it was hard for me? Back in my day, I had $3 and I bought a house, a car, and built a family. Then I put the other dollar into my savings account. Yeah, exactly, Misty. Ecuadorian baseball says, as an Ecuadorian, I'm angry our president is allowing Kristi Noem, named after a garden statue, to basically run over our sovereignty. We need Republican leaders out of our presidencies internationally. I agree with that. Eleni says, no double negative. So you're saying, why didn't bailing out the banks in the 2000 housing crisis work? I mean, an argument could be made that it did work. The American government made more money on that bailout than they lost, but recovery was still really difficult for the American people cost of living increases still continued. Now Barack Obama, being president in 2008, had a couple of advantages and a couple of disadvantages. The advantages were that we had a legitimate progressive in the White House, and so he was able to staff agencies with the people that he wanted to staff. The things that made it difficult when Obama was president was, number one, he was the first black president, so he was going to be judged based off of everything that he fucking did. If he ordered, brown mustard, fancy brown mustard with his lunch, if he wore a tan suit, fucking don't forget Coffeegate, where he was holding a cup of coffee at the same time as he was, saluting some soldiers or some shit like that. So if he tried to be as progressive and transformative as he wanted to be, he would have been raked over the coals. And instead, he worked with the other people in his party to have a much more centrist, I don't want to say neoliberal, but definitely leaning neoliberal kind of an administration. And even that was too much for the billionaire class, and they just fucking raked him over the coals, and, they dragged their feet on the Affordable Care Act, and the Democrats lost, the House and the Senate in the subsequent elections. So, was it good that he equivocated to not piss people off as the first black president? Was it good that he spent so much time adhering to norms and working with the centrists in his own party? I don't know. Hindsight's 2020. An argument could be made, but yeah, I forget what your original question was. Oh, about the bailout. Yeah. All right, back into these TikTok comments. Mel says, what if Proposition 50 fails? Will New Jersey stay blue? If Prop 50 fails, then California will have to keep the maps that they currently have, which, we will probably still have more Democratic House members. We might even increase our presence in the House through California, but it'll just be a lot harder, and a lot of the gerrymandering that's happening in red states will be a lot more productive for the Republican Party. And will New Jersey stay blue? I have no idea. If you live in New Jersey, go vote. If you live in California, Pennsylvania, New York, go out and vote if you haven't voted already, everybody. Alrighty. Dan says, NYC election, question mark? There is an election in New York today. Misty Lane says, wasn't Obamacare made by the Heritage Foundation originally, so why do Republicans hate it so much? I don't know about the Heritage Foundation. I do know that Mitt Romney instituted that for the state of Massachusetts when he was governor there, but I don't know if its origin story was in the Heritage Foundation, or if that was just a Mitt Romney original. The reason why Republicans hated it is because Democrats wanted to do it. And because the president was black and he was trying to do it. They needed to not let Democrats accomplish anything that would make Americans' lives better. And if Democrats did do something that they couldn't stop, they had to make up a bunch of lies about it and say it wasn't working and overhype the mistakes with it. Like, you remember how the website didn't work on day one just because, I don't know, 50 million people all tried to use it at the same time? Like, how about you make a website that works for 50 million people on the first day right away, But that was the biggest fucking scandal in the world, Again, guys, what we're kind of circling around here is this weird double standard that we have for the political parties, where the Democrats never get any credit and Republicans never get any blame. The Republican Party can never be bad enough to justify voting against them, but the Democratic Party can never be good enough for us to justify voting for them. And I'm fucking sick of this shit, Alrighty. Mick says, never vote blue again. Raised prices by 60%. That is inaccurate. And also, you're spamming the comments, so you are out of here. MAGA versus verse. Good to see you again, says, and not take the Medicaid expansion and take the requirements to enroll. Yeah, 100%. Okay. Troy Taguda says, since 2008, the government has been bailing out banks with QAs increasing the national debt by tens of trillions. Troy Taguda. I gotta tell you, I'm a little skeptical of that. As far as I know, there was only the main bailout, and I do not believe. Whoa! Average Joe, are you seeing what I'm seeing on YouTube? Oh, you're not on YouTube. God damn it! All right, gotta go ahead and block this guy. Sorry, somebody was just really fucking popping off on my YouTube. Okay, what was I talking about? Yeah, if I'm gonna put the national debt on anything, I believe it's going to be the tax cuts for the rich, as opposed to the bank bailouts, which made money for the American government. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure. MAGA Verse confirms that the Heritage Foundation did originally author Obamacare. So there we go. Kimberlina says, waiting for Trump to confuse circuit courts with Johnny Five. That's very funny. I had the pleasure of showing my wife Short Circuit for the first time, and that was awesome. Didn't I not block you on YouTube? Block that user on YouTube. Yeah, let's do it. So sorry, everybody. I'm going to have to do a little bit extra work to block this person on YouTube, because they are just really doing some nasty shit on my YouTube right now. Some real, what do you call it? Some real hate crimes happening on my YouTube right now. Okay. All right. Let me just block this whole user. All right. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. All right, where are we at? All right, we're at 10 minutes till we are at an hour. Misty Lane, yeah. Yeah, I'm with you, Misty Lane. Oh, he came in with a new account. Oh, I see. All right. Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully that's the end of that. But, we will. Okay. No, he's back. He keeps on making new accounts. That's so cool. What a cool use of time. Thank you, Misty Lane. I really appreciate that. Okay. Let's see here. MAGA versus TikTok is just weird today. I'm happy you're on to provide some rational thought. Yeah, I mean, no, the problem I'm having is over on YouTube right now with this dude keeps on making new accounts that say the name of his account is just hate N-words, only he is not using the phrase N-word, he's using the actual N-word, and so, I'm trying my best to block him, but for some reason he is evading my blocks. I think I might have to keep this tab open the entire time. So sorry, everybody, for a stream of consciousness, my what do you call it? My admin issues today. All right, Osher says, do you have any faith in the next round of Democrats passing meaningful healthcare reform? Yes, I do. Alrighty. Okay. All right, looks like we're good right now. All right. Smiley Mojo says, do you think Scott Morrison actually sharted in the McDonald's restaurant? I don't know. That's Australia, right? Okay. Okay. Lauren says, are you seeing all of the election interference Trump is running right now? I heard that he said that he's going to be quote unquote, looking into the vote in California. No idea what that is. I haven't seen any reports about voter intimidation, though I'm sure it's happening. And weird things happening in Pennsylvania where a bunch of independent and third party registered voters had their voter registrations deleted in a county that is like an hour east of where my mom lives. And so I texted her and she said that her mail in ballot was lost in the mail. So yeah, a lot of fuckery going on. Asha says, could you elaborate? Pete Buttigieg's Medicare for All Who Want It is a corporate washed Medicare for All. So Medicare for All Who Want It is a policy called single payer, meaning that competing with all of the other insurance plans that you could possibly have is also the government-run health plan, which would be, let's say, significantly cheaper than trying to get it from, Blue Cross or, United Healthcare or something like that. And it's a compromise, and, there's two ways of thinking about those compromise bills. Number one is it delays the amount of time for us to get to universal health care. And in that delay, the billionaire class in the Republican Party can poke holes in it, the same way they poked holes in the Affordable Care Act. And just people are going to suffer. In the length of time that it takes us to finally get to universal health care, people are going to suffer. So that's one argument. But the other argument is, and I kind of fall down on this argument myself, is that the incrementalism is necessary to make the transition to universal health care as easy as possible. Having a public option would be transformational for America. It would put a lot more money into Medicare and Medicaid, which was just fucking gutted by the Trump administration, by the way. I don't know if you guys were here yesterday, but I was like, I couldn't remember. I was like, did the big beautiful bill cut Medicare and Medicaid? And someone in my comments was no. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I remembered it. And I double checked it and I was fucking right. So yeah, we are going to see a lot more money into Medicare and Medicaid. We're going to see the health insurance companies will then have to compete with the single payer option, which will make them better plans in general. But it's going to be difficult for them to compete because they're still going to have a profit. They're still going to have yacht money for their CEOs and their shareholders, and the government is not going to have that. The government is not going to have to spend money on advertising the way that health insurance companies are going to have to spend money on advertising. So yeah, I don't believe that is a fight that they will win, and I believe that we will start seeing a heftier move towards universal health care if we were to have that. But again, that's a little bit of me spitballing there. Right. Okay. Fantastic. All right. Yeah, we don't have that guy on YouTube anymore. Thank goodness. Okay. All right, where are we at? We're at almost an hour. Back in the TikTok comments. Troy Taguda says, inaccurate. Some fraud was removed from Medicare. I don't buy that at all, Troy. Stephen Harding says, the Dems and Republicans will get lobbied so hard by insurance to where it would never work. So Stephen Harding, I object to the cynicism of that comment. The Democratic Party has made inroads in making health insurance and healthcare in general cheaper for the American people. And the Republican Party has done the opposite. They are actively making everybody's healthcare costs go up exponentially. So when you say that the Republicans and Democrats it is inevitable that they will be lobbied so hard by the insurance companies that they are going to water down all of their healthcare, legislation is, I believe, inaccurate. And I just got reported, everybody, for unverified information. People on the right fucking hate it when I tell the truth about shit. How about that, guys? All right, but I mean, we're at an hour almost, so like, who gives a shit if I can't get any new viewers for the next 5 minutes or so that I'm going to be on here. Stephen Harding says they watered it down with the Affordable Care Act. Yeah, because they needed to compromise with the centrists in their party. Joe Lieberman, they needed all 60 of those votes. It wasn't because of lobbying money, or if it was because of lobbying money, it was just because the Republican Party was fully blocking that they had to compromise with people like Joe Lieberman. So yeah, you can miss me with that both sides stuff. Troy says Democrats increased the income limits on the Affordable Care Act, making premiums skyrocket. I also don't buy that at all, Troy Taguda. Ask a question or you're going to be out of here. Same thing with you, Stephen Harding. Alrighty, let's see here. Mr. Payne says, because Donald, saved us during the pandemic. Is Donald Trump the greatest American who ever lived? Yeah, no, that is not the case. The pandemic wouldn't have been a pandemic if somebody else was in charge. We could have stopped it in China. Alrighty. Is not single payer. It's not. Osher. So let's talk about this. So you're saying Pete's Medicare for all who want it is not single payer. It's not Medicare for all. I'm pretty sure it is though. So Medicare for all who want it is the American citizens being able to choose if they want the government health insurance or not, which is single payer if I'm remembering correctly. All right, Stephen Harding says Trump tried to stop flights from China and the left called it racist. Tell the truth. I will tell the truth. I fucked your mom. See you later, buddy. You know, To the Moon says, won't universal health care actually pay out as it should while private denies claims to save money and be cheaper? Yes, 100%. All right. Let's see here. All right. John Abbott says, did you see the several New Jersey polling locations got shut down today because of bomb threats? I did see that one. And that is, again, people on the right who are trying to fuck with the election. John Selfridge, Truth Rules, Bro Keeps On, thank you. Misty Lane says, are you a big fan of regulating natural monopolies? If you don't know what that is, it's when you have to lay a pipeline and wire underneath buildings and roads, pre-establishment infrastructure. Yes. So, like, you and I can't start our own, internet company because we would need to lay, a lot of, Ethernet cables underneath people's houses and shit like that. And we do not have the ability to do that kind of construction, So we should be socializing industries like that where there cannot be natural competition in the market. I 100% agree with that, Missy Lane, if I just understood your meaning there. Average Joe says, propaganda tactic of the day, argument by reputation, making a claim more believable by increasing the listener's familiarity with that claim. Yes, watch out for that, everybody. Thank you again, Average Joe. Completely agree with you, Missy Lane, on that. All right, everybody, we are at an hour, so I'm going to start wrapping things up. Get your last comments and questions in now. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for all the likes, the shares, the questions, the comments, and the gifts. It is your support that allows me to keep on doing these shows. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I have a Patreon that you can join for as little as $1 a month. Shout out to my current patrons, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick. Y'all are the best. I hope you are watching today. I know some of you are. I saw Carmine in here. I think I saw BB Fan in here. Let's see here. I also have a store that you can buy things from on my website. Link is in the bio. And you can also send gifts on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube and become super subscribers. There's all sorts of fun ways to become paying fans, and if that's something that you want to do. But you don't have to. I know that we're all struggling. Let's see here. If you have any questions about politics or how to get more involved in politics and or anything, and I'm not live streaming, or I had a question that I wasn't able to get to because we had a lot of questions today, then send me a DM. Shoot me an email through my website. Hit me up on my Discord. I want to be a resource for you guys. I want to be a resource to educate you about what the government is doing, about great organizations that you can volunteer for or donate to. And so if I can be that resource for you, I want to be. Use me and abuse me. Use me until I am all used up. The Discord is my favorite resource right now because I'm able to put there's community engagement, but also I'm able to recommend things like podcasts and books and also great organizations to volunteer for. And let's see here. What else goes in my regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. We have a special show this Friday. We are moving the show to 3:30 p.m. this Friday. So if you're a regular at the 11:30 time, we are moving it on Friday. I don't want to see any of my fucking regulars on Friday saying, oh, what are you doing here? We're at 3:30. It's so late. We missed you this afternoon. I'm letting you all know. It's on the schedule. It's on the calendar. It has been updated everywhere. This Friday, we are doing 3:30 instead of 11:30. And lastly, schedule patrons, get in touch, Discord. Yeah, I just really hope that everybody does the work, because it is only through us doing the work that we're going to be able to fight back against billionaire control over our government and of our elections. All right, let's see here. Thank you, Average Joe. Misty, thank you. JP says, remember to tip your servers. They're working hard tonight. That's very funny. Let's see here. Thank you, John Selfridge. John Abbott says, the way you're explaining the for all who want it sounds like you can opt out. My understanding of Pete's proposal is no opt-out, but option to have additional private insurance. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess my apologies, Asher. I think that I maybe did not know enough about Pete's plan to opine on it. My apologies to everybody. Alrighty. Danny is terrible says, has everyone got out to vote? That is a good question. Everybody get out there and vote if you haven't voted already. And otherwise, be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. Don't forget. And I will see y'all tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat